My grandmother was an archivist, so I guess I'm following in her steps, but I've got all sorts of stuff since even before Fanny, so, and what's gone on at IMA since the very beginning, which was in the 80s and 90s.
What did your grandmother archive?
Well, for example, Pete Seeger got all his songs for his first album, Songs of Appalachia. He got them from her. She was recording, guys collecting maple from the trees and the songs that they sang, whatever. She collected songs songs of Lake Champlain. She was from that Northeast area. And that was something she did. And he really, really loved and admired her. I interviewed him about a year before he died.
It's amazing. So she was kind of in that like Alan Lomax sort of field recording.
Yeah, but she didn't go out, and drive to different parts of the country. She was very local. So it'd be Burlington, Lake Champlain, upstate New York. Yeah.
Has music been in your family the entire time?
I can't say that as an actual full statement. It's been part of our culture, but I mean, I'm Philippine American, so the American side of my family is so different side from the Philippine side, which is very musical, very musical. So music runs in my veins in a certain way, and I can feel it. Also, I'm in touch with, the spiritual side, and they're the ones who give me a lot of information. They're the ones who asked me to start IMA, actually.
When you say spiritual, are you talking about any kind of practice in particular, or just broadly?
Yeah, I'm a Buddhist, and the two streams that I learned, one was from the Dalai Lama, so I did the Kalachakra with him. And when he did the Kalachakra, that was in Madison, Wisconsin in 81, he said that particular practice, I mean, Kalachakra is pretty intense, but he said it was yoga of the imagination, that style of Tibetan Buddhism, which really fits in with me because I go into places, in my imagination and whatnot. I don't have hearing in my left ear, and therefore I feel like that really opens up a lot of channels to be spoken to have, my bidding, for me to hear my bidding. And I really do. So, that's different from a lot of people. And also Ruth Dennison was my Vipassana teacher, and she really taught me a lot about the actual nature of reality, which is so different than what we perceive as, our reality. This is what I see, what I hear. It's actually a bit different from that.
I'm going to need an explanation on that. What form does it take?
Well, I can't really give you, I'm not a qualified practitioner
Sure.
or teacher. The short version would be, since we have five senses, and we also have a place in our brain, one side and the other side is about this big, like a cherry or something. So one side's pitch and one side's, pitch and cadence, essentially, and if you're going to study Buddhism at all, you have to accept that the nature of life or the nature of being here is the first point of suffering. So that's a big one to get over. But what she really honed in on teaching me, I feel like she really was hard on because she wanted me to get it, is that, as I was saying, the left and right brain have pitch and cadence, or how you say words, hey, we don't talk like this. We've got that skip in our voice, right? I think of it as you have all these senses coming in with data, raw data, and you have an app in your brain to put it all together and make up a story every single second. That happens to be the truth. So there is no one truth, like everyone sees one thing happen. That's the problem with witnesses. They don't all remember the same color of the car, et cetera, and so forth. So that's at a very basic level what the nature of phenomena is. And, she also taught us that you really shouldn't, or you can't believe everything that you think are your own thoughts. They're not your own thoughts. If you're sitting in meditation, you can hear other thoughts come in. They're just out there in the universe. So I think a lot of people who are troubled by their thoughts actually don't have their thoughts. They're believing what's coming through. And that's a really fine but huge distinction, because once you get that, you don't have to believe everything. Even if I get a little bit depressed, I'll think, well, what am I, what's going on? What am I thinking? I don't have to believe this. It saves a lot of trouble. And it's something. So that's the basis of my understanding of the nature of reality through the Buddhist teachings, which I think are helpful hints from the universe.
If I heard you correctly, the nature of life is suffering.
Well, that's where you start from the Four Noble Truths. The first one is suffering. And everything from there kind of explains the nature of suffering, why we suffer so much, how we keep going into suffering, in and out of it, and so on. And meditation is a way for you to not be so focused, on that. They're just ways to free. It's about freedom, really.
When did you start your meditation practice?
Well, I was reading about Buddhism when I was in Fanny. I was trying to read it as much as I could, but I didn't start with any teachers. I mean, I've had a lot of teachers, and not just in Buddhism, but Buddhism is my, basically my way. I guess I started with actual teachers somewhere in the late 80s. And I did the Kalachakra with His Holiness in 1981 in Madison, Wisconsin. And then later that year, I found out about Ruth Dennison when I was in Hawaii, actually. So I went immediately to her, and I was there with her at her desert retreat outside, even higher than Joshua Tree, by New Year's Eve, 1981. So that's when 81 was really big for me in terms of really beginning to receive the teachings from qualified teachers. The teachers, they know all the pitfalls. They'll help you. Because when you're getting into, you get so confused.
Yeah. I finally got to a point where I used to count down the minutes while I was doing it. And I finally got to a point where when my buzzer goes off and I'm a little bit disappointed.
Count down the minutes. I mean, that's not the thing.
Well, I just mean, yeah, well, that's my point. Exactly. I just mean that I when I first started attempting it, I would get really restless.
Were you by yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I really can't impress enough how important it is to be with a teacher, because they really break down a lot of stuff for you. And you go to places much more easily. Yeah, it's really hard to meditate because you're listening to your thoughts. But how to not listen to your thoughts and get freed up. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, I was free for like 2 seconds, however long it is. And then it becomes longer. And then you realize, oh, I don't have to be tethered to all this and be all like anxious and all that kind of stuff. It's subtle, but it's really deep.
Yeah.
Life is hard.
Yeah, life is suffering. Yeah.
I said life is hard.
Yeah. What kind, if any, impact has your spiritual practice had on your music?
Oh, I think it's had quite a bit. While I was sort of intuiting the search, when I was in Fanny, I was writing songs like Think About the Children, You've Got a Home, stuff like that. That is really the seeker voice, Tomorrow is another example, which I'd forgotten I'd even written. So I think I've always been a seeker, and I've gone into other, teachers and religions, but clearly the Buddhist path, especially the Himalayan path, and there's about 5 of those, and then the Vipassana, which comes more from Burma, clearly that is my way.
Seeking, did that coincide? You've discussed this period of your life, when you were, I think, 23 and you were really, really struggling on the road. Is that the time when you started really looking?
Well, I mean, I was looking, but I hadn't found any teachers yet. So I was looking on my own, which is its own thing, right? So I was seeking, but also, you're doing shows practically every night, and that takes you into a different realm, That's not particularly a meditation unless you disappear, which I think I did quite a bit, disappear into the all through music, which is a great thing to do. It's wonderful.
So there's a sense in which the music itself is meditative.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Music is one of the most exalted ways to get to nothingness, to get to the truth, to get to freedom. It's incredible.
This period that I mentioned, to me, just reading about it and obviously not knowing you, it sounds like burnout is probably the word that I would use. That there was a period where the way you described it, you were just having trouble, connecting with people and making lasting friends.
Well, yeah, there was burnout, but I would say that the places where we didn't fit together as a band, like all the fights I had with Nikki, she just didn't get me, I didn't get her, etc. That was really tough. And then when we weren't selling enough records, like 60,000 units per album was not enough, we could tell that the record company had lost faith in us and they're trying to get us to wear these skimpier outfits. And I really hated that, along with my mental distress, and my love had left me, etc. So everything kind of fell apart for me.
I read an interview that Nikki did, I think, around the time of the movie. I mean, obviously, she wasn't really involved in the reissues with the rest of you.
She
But
did not do an interview for the movie. Trust me, she's
okay.
Incommunicado.
So somebody posted an online email interview that they did.
All right.
Yeah, it sounded like overall the entire experience was she just didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, that's her spin. That's what she says. However, I will tell you that we did have fun at times, So she would allow herself to be enjoying the moment, but it didn't really last for that long. And I don't know if it was really that genuine. It's so hard for me to know because I never really knew Nikki. Yep. Jean, Alice, and myself, we had been in the svelte. So we had been in that teenage tumbling around years. We never had that with Nikki. So we didn't have that ease with her. She came in with all these sort of assumptions about girl musicians, and she didn't want to be in a girl band, but she didn't have anything else, in the works, I guess you could say. So it was tough for her, but that wasn't my problem.
Is it possible to connect with somebody musically who you just aren't getting along with on a personal level?
Well, I suppose you can for a bit, because music is so incredible and it will free you from the bonds of intolerance or dislike or whatever for bits of time. But I don't think as a full program, I don't think it can do that. You're still going to have your differences, It
sounds like overall you really look back on that period fondly. But obviously a lot of things didn't go the way you had hoped or planned. Was it?
I mean, the society itself was so against us, and that with, the insults that Nikki would sort of say to me, either overtly or covertly. That was all as a package really hard. But, I was in the band with Jean, my sister, and with Alice, and we did great work. So when we were doing great work, we were having fun.
Did it take time, though, to get that perspective after you left the band to realize, it's hard to know how good something is when you're actually going through it because, people tend to focus on the bad things.
I wasn't really trying to think of how easy or hard it was. I just know I was traumatized by the experience. And I left Fanny without asking for anything, no royalties, no money to speak of. I think I got $50 a gig for like 6 months. I just asked for something, So, I didn't want to think of Fanny at all. I did not. I refused to. I wouldn't even speak to my mom about it. Or Toshi Regan is a great artist. She said, you ought to talk about Fanny. I'm like, that is over with, and Alice would ask me to listen to Fanny, Jean. I wouldn't do it until we had to listen to all the takes that were sent to us with regards to the 4 CD compilation. And then I had to listen and I realized, okay, yeah, all right, we were good. We were good. We were really good. So what am I going to do about that now? I had to start surrendering to that. And I started to have different dreams, which is really great. I saw different rooms at Fanny Hill, and there were nice people, and it was a really cleaned up vibe rather than, kind of this like, don't open the door to the basement because there's all those sounds. I mean, literally, I would perceive that in dreams. I was really afraid of going there. And also, I was so young when it all happened, so I had no way to really process it. So I hadn't yet processed it. But after that 40 CD compilation came out in 2002, I sort of had to surrender to it. And little by little, through everything that's happened, recording Fanny Walk the Earth and the documentary, I've had to really take a look at it and appreciate it for how, what it was from my point of view.
Yeah. So that's several decades you went without ever listening to the music.
Exactly right. And there were little things that happened, like around 1975, maybe, a woman who worked with the Fillmore, her name was Steely Dan. She did an interview with the San Francisco Chronicle or Rolling Stone or something like that. And she made this comment that totally closed the door for me. And here is a woman who works with the Fillmore, with Bill Graham. She said, Fanny was a one-trick pony, and I completely closed down. Completely. That was it. The doors closed and locked. I was so upset when I read that. Why did she say that? Well, on what basis? So we got comments like that from both men and women, sort of, I don't know, they were trying to be the critic. But, you don't always get to be a critic and just not actually consider all the factors involved, that we had a lot of guys insult us since the time we first started the Svelts and, 65, 66. And we've been sneered at all that time, and we've gotten better despite all that. Nobody gave us credit for that. No one gave us credit for, not no one, but not enough people gave us credit for persevering and getting better and better. And actually, we got a lot better than the bands who were criticizing us. That's a fact. And they were not happy about it.
At what point did you become aware that people were starting to have that conversation, that Fanny had really opened the door for a lot of other bands?
There were a few good comments in the press, but I'd say mostly it was the audiences. I think it was mostly the audiences. And, when I thought back about it, it's mostly the boys who would come up to us and say, oh my God, whatever they would say. And there would be girls with them, but they didn't say anything. So that's how the picture was at the time. Girls looked up at us and you could see in their eyes, boy, you guys, I wish I was one of you, And we did get some mail. But I think it was the audiences that, we wouldn't have kept going on the road for 3 years and gotten all those gigs if we sucked. Let's put it that way.
I mean, in terms of, there's an appreciation for the band now that perhaps didn't exist before, of you being pioneers and of you opening the door for a lot of musicians that have walked through it since. But it seems like that's the kind of thing that develops slowly over time.
But we knew it. I mean, just listen to the intro to A Lot of Good Love. Just listen to the intro of that. That's not, that's pretty sophisticated. But nobody said, hey, that is a really sophisticated intro. Wow, how did they manage to do that? It's not the same intros on the original song. That's a cover. But still, we would make everything our own. Or we got a lot of good comments about Badge. And I was compared to Eric Clapton, and some critics said that they thought my solo was better. Now, I never thought that because my solo was based on Eric's, but I did emote something from a girl that was simply that. I mean, you wouldn't get that from a guy. It was the sort of the yearning of just wanting to break through, of getting as much as I could out of life, etc. And you can hear that even just like on the last note of my solo. It's just that cry. Okay, so that was me, and backed by Fanny, who was playing their hearts out. So we weren't fooling around, man. And a lot of times when we were recording, like Lowell George would be there. He was a really good friend of ours. Skunk wasn't there so much, even though he was a good friend. But Sly, whom we'd done a gig with in not Fanny, in the Svelts, he would come plop down in the studio. He liked us, So there were a few people who really were comfortable with us, and they were the guys who were out there the most. Sly and Lowell, you can't get more out there than that, really. Frank Zappa adored us,
Well, yeah, really, if you were to ask me to name the outlandish musicians of that period, those two would be on the top of my list. But also, certainly David Bowie was pushing a lot of boundaries, and he had subsequently said some really great things about the band. Did he seem like he was on board at the time?
Well, yeah, apparently he sent us a kind of a love letter / a fan letter when he did his first album. He sent it to us and said, "Oh, I really love you girls." And I don't remember it. Nobody has it, now. So, but he really was a fan of ours. And we met him on the road. We were in, I think it was Liverpool, and he was staying in the same hotel. We did a gig at the same time. And we got back to the hotel, and there was a note at the desk saying, "David Bowie would like you to come up to his party in the penthouse." And that is described in the book and was really incredible. The elevator door opened, and it was the penthouse, and it was full of people. But it was a really nice, quiet, sophisticated party. And I actually ended up spending all night with him and just talking. That was fabulous. He completely accepted us as equals. So that was really great. That was really great.
I mean, on the notes of both being in Liverpool and, like the Clapton cover being compared to other musicians, one of the other big covers that you did was "Hey Bulldog" by the Beatles. And it sounds to me like you felt like you were getting a lot of pressure from the record label to be the Beatles.
No. You've got that completely wrong. Why did you think that? I mean, the record company never said anything about that. We chose that song. We had a great running through it at Fanny Hill without anybody telling us to. We're not thinking of busting the envelope on the Beatles. We were just having a great time playing. That's what we did. That's what we were best at. And so, hey, I don't even think we knew we were going to record with Jeff Emmerich when we started doing that song. I don't have that in my head. Oh, we got to play this really well for Jeff. What happened was that we loved that song so much. We made up that verse, and then when we got to Apple and Jeff was engineering, I mean, he couldn't have been more surprised and happy that we knew how to play and knew how to record. So those to me are the triumphant moments. We met George and Ringo because their offices were right upstairs, and we met Paul and Linda at a different session at Air because Richard was producing Carly Simon at the same time. He's so vain, you're so vain. And then I met John when my brother Earl Slick, whom Gene eventually married, when he was playing on Double Fantasy. So I did work with see all the Beatles, and they were thrilled with us. So I want to disabuse you of that notion that they wanted us to be like the Beatles. What I will say is they want to sell more records, and they want us to show more tits and ass when I left. And that I would not do. I mean, there's just, I have my, I guess you could say my ethics and my morals. I didn't feel like I've never kind of posture like a man or a boy when I play guitar. I don't need to do that. I worked so hard on playing that I don't need to have my guitar, coming out on my crotch and doing what guys do that way. They've got a dick, so they represented it with their guitar. I don't have one, and I'm not representing it. I meant to be crass. I never felt the need to do that. Never. So, let me disabuse you of that notion. Everything we did, we either chose, or maybe Richard and management might have mentioned a song, but I don't remember any song that they mentioned. I feel like we chose all our material.
To clarify, I didn't mean the choice of the song. I meant that, for example, keeping four of you to have the band be more than
well, that's not playing. That's the sort of,
Yeah, sorry, that's what I
the presentation. That's true. That's true. They wanted us to be like the Beatles and have four of us, and they thought that we had a really good chance to do that. But we didn't stay long enough to really develop our own original material. I mean, the Beatles were doing their own original material from the jump. We did not stay together long enough to really do that. I mean, the Beatles didn't need to stay together. They were doing it from the jump. But you hear what I'm saying. There was so much stuff confronting us that was really unpalatable, quite frankly. It was almost impossible to get through the thicket of preconceptions about how girls weren't supposed to do it. It was really horrible. That side of it was truly horrible. It's hard for me to explain, but it was unpalatable.
I get the sense it's something that you had to fight against, certainly in the earliest days, was the idea that by the nature of having an all-female band, that it was effectively a novelty band.
Yeah. Yep. They expected us to be topless a lot, on the first tour. They still expected us to be topless. A lot of, even college audiences.
Did the tides change? Did opinions change? Did you feel like by the end that you were getting at least a little more respect?
Well, by 71, we got a lot more respect. I mean, 71 was the year in which we played both the Fillmore East, Fillmore West. We backed up Barbra Streisand live in the studio on 2 songs. We played on the Sonny and Cher show. We went to England at the end of the year and we're conquering audiences there. We played Beat Club and we recorded our album at Apple with Jeff Emmerich. I mean, it really couldn't get any better than that.
You use the word traumatized to describe that period and what you had to work on afterwards. Was it anything in particular, or was it just all of this piled up on top of each other?
Anything in particular? I mean, we could point to certain criticisms of our performances or the records that were just horrible. Yeah. So every single one of them hurt, like a woman said, well, I hate to say it, but I just don't think women should be on stage playing electric instruments, being a band. I just can't help it, or the guitar player for Patti Smith wrote a horrible article on us, I think in Rolling Stone, in which he said we were sort of like, pretenders, or we were derivative or whatever. Derivative was a word that was used on us a lot when I look back at the reviews. I stopped reading the reviews after a while because, I was just trying to be as good as I could. And I was improving, every week because I practiced so hard. And I had such great teachers. You don't get teachers like Lowell George, Elliot Randall, Skunk Baxter. Those are, I feel like, my top 3 teachers. And they were really invested in me. They gave me the goods. So in that sense, the true players who understood what you had to go through, they were on my side and they gave me everything they could. So I knew I was getting better because I could keep up, but it never was enough for society, for that terrible, it was almost an invisible barrier. Girls don't enter. In every way that was said to us.
When you said Skunk before, I was wondering if you were talking about Skunk Baxter. He is, talk about interesting characters. He's basically a rocket scientist or involved in missile command at this point.
Oh yeah. He's always been that way. He's incredible. Yeah, he's one of my best friends. He can play classical music on guitar. He can, really, he can play anything. And, to have a teacher like that is very special because they're going to give you the rarefied stuff. They're going to give you the real stuff. He taught me just little things that I could put in my arsenal that I still use today. And he worked on my guitars. He was my guitar repairman. That's how I met him.
It sounds like Todd Rundgren didn't have anything to offer in the teaching department.
Todd was kind of a mixed bag for me. Clearly he knew what he was doing and we did have some fun, but there was just a certain place that he wouldn't let us girls go past. He was clearly superior in his mind. So that was it. There was no place to go. There was no real center we could go to and like snuggle and be there and know that we had mutual respect. That was not.
It felt like a one-way street.
Yeah, when during the mixing, when he wouldn't let us and me in the studio, I didn't want to make any comments. I just wanted to be there. That was, the ultimate insult.
How did you get into teaching yourself?
I co-founded the Institute for the Musical Arts, and within the context of that, I didn't plan to be a teacher, but because we couldn't afford to hire teachers, and I ended up teaching stuff. And one of them is recording, and how I got the information for that, even though I've been recording for years, I got it from my brother who's in the film. His name is David Scott. He lives in Hawaii, and he's a great sound man / engineer. So he taught me stuff, and I was able to pass it on. But in terms of teaching guitar, I just had to do it because we couldn't afford to hire anyone for the longest time.
What was the initial spark behind the school?
I heard voices, quite frankly, and they told me. That's what I mean. I have an open channel to my ancestors, basically my ancestors and my angels. And I first heard the voices in 1976 in LA in a women's music meeting. And then in 1986, I was living with a partner who co-runs the Institute of Musical Arts. She was running the Women's Center at Hampshire College, and I was living with her. And I heard the voices again, but louder, and there were more of them. They were coming in my dreams. So I was doing a lot of gigs at the time, and I was in San Francisco hanging out with Angela Davis, and I told her about these voices, and she said, well, get going. This is a true story. And I said, what? Not me. I'm not an organizer. And she said the only thing that could have worked, and that was, well, they're talking to you. So between Ann and Angela Davis, it really kicked my ass and got me going. And we wrote a sort of a manifesto together. And Angela joined the board along with Roma Barron, who produced Laurie Anderson. She did Oh Superman, for example. In fact, she's still on our board and teaches at our recording camps. So in a way, I tried to hook up with all the best people whom I knew involved in the music biz, and we just took it from there. But it was originally literally hearing voices. And when I say that, it's like an intuition. I didn't really hear them. I did hear some words like, who's going to take care of all the younger women who are going to be coming down the pike? Who's going to take care of them? So that highly concerned me because I knew how hard it had been for us, even as, 15-year-olds starting our first band. You need help.
Yeah, I feel like Angela Davis, you can't say, oh, I can't be a teacher and I can't be an organizer to her because, she's great at
totally kick-ass, and she's so smart, she's going to outwit you at every turn. So she, like I said, she did it in one line. Well, they're talking to you. I was defeated in my position, of, I can't do this.
It's like getting beat in one move on chess.
Right. Yeah, she's incredible.
Is Anna a musician as well?
She plays cello.
Oh,
so it's a completely different scene. But yes, her mom taught violin, and she grew up in Illinois. Those Midwestern girls. There's a lot of great players out there because the music in the schools, the music programs are incredible. So some of the best musicians that I've played with come from the Midwest. Seriously. Alice was from the Midwest, for example.
Did the two of you meet through music?
Let me see. We had started the Svelte. She had come out west to seek her fame and fortune, and she saw a little ad that we'd written up that was in a music store that we were looking for a drummer. So she called. And that was the Sveltes. That wasn't even Wild Honey yet, or God forbid, Fanny. So that was a bit back. So when I say that Nikki didn't experience that, sort of the teen years of just kind of tromping around and trying stuff out. And we had a lot of good times, we didn't have that with her. We didn't have that girlfriend thing with her. And that's a whole, the estrogen thing when you're kind of connected that way. It's really different. It's really different.
Yeah. Was it ever hard being in several bands with your sister? And obviously, like you have such a close connection to that person, but oftentimes siblings are the people that you fight with the most.
I can't say I really remember fighting with her, and the opposites of that is we didn't really talk about it that much. We just knew. We just knew this was something we had to do, and we went for it. Every time we lost a girl in the band, it was a complete trauma. We lost 2 drummers before we found Alice, and they were both great. In fact, one of them was Bree, and we lost our original guitar player, singer, who was so great in the mix. And we got Addie, who was in Wild Honey, who was the band that played at the Troubadour in L.A., and how we got the deal, the record deal. She's not very much mentioned, but she was a kick-ass guitar player. She still plays, but, so all the girls or young women that we had in our band that we managed to find were really great. I don't know how we managed to do it, but that's what happened. So Gene and I were always united. I think we didn't fight because there was so much pressure against it that we were just consolidated and united in our desire for doing it. And so when I left Fanny in '73, it was tremendously difficult, but I was eaten up. I was just too tired. I didn't know how to handle anything. And like I said, my lover had left me, so I was pretty broken and like a shell of a person inside. But that was great for learning.
Did you ever consider leaving music altogether?
Well, I've kind of toyed with the idea a couple of times, but I don't really know anything else. And music is really seriously the thing that A, I know, and B, that fills me the way that nothing else does. So it really is fulfilling. Music is incredible. So it's healing also. So not only did it express itself through me and teach me things, but it really healed me, and it's still healing me in so many ways.
So it was clear to you after leaving the band that you were going to find your way back into the music world some way or another.
Well, I mean, nothing was clear to me. I just was blindly going towards something. I knew that I wasn't really crazy about playing rock. And we went a little bit into rock country because Nikki liked that. Well, I felt more like I was a kind of a Motown soul. Soul was what I was really interested in. Okay. So, but then I got to the New York area. I lived in Long Island for 6 months to a year. I'd go into New York to jam, and Giacomo Marcellino, the drummer of, so he had a coterie of friends. I would go jam with them. I met Leo Adamian, and I slowly but surely my view of music shifted, and I started to learn about salsa. I started to learn reggae. I started to sort of open my mind and my technique to other techniques, because New York is different from LA. So it really did feed me in that way. And I learned as much as I could. I mean, as fast as I could. And also I continued to work or jam with Elliot Randall. He played the solo on Reelin' in the Years, but we were friends from having done a gig at the Whiskey. That's how I met him. And of course I also knew Skunk. So, and Skunk invited him to play that solo in Reelin' in the Years. So there was a big connection there.
You're talking about Steely Dan, and the two of them are notorious for being, like perfectionists when it comes to music. You were somewhat in that world. Were they aware of the bands, and did they like the band?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because Skunk and I would talk when we were on the road. And I remember once I was in New York and he called me and just wanted to chat. And he told me he was leaving Steely Dan. I said, what? Because Steely Dan was so, they were so successful, and he'd already done Ricky Don't Lose That Number, which I think has one of the best solos ever of all time. And I said, why? And he just kind of felt like, they were just too intent on getting too stoned. They were too uptight and, whatever. So when he said he was joining Steely Dan, and I was aghast. I didn't think that. The Doobie Brothers.
Doobie Brothers, yeah.
Yeah, and they had that one hit and, taking it to the street. I didn't hear like the stuff, but I realized he had Michael McDonald waiting in the wings, etc. So, and how great was that, but he told me that he took them into the studio for about a month and they practiced on click. So they would all know how to record the way that he knew they should be recorded.
Interesting. Yeah, the band was Sha Na Na.
Thank you. And I was really good. We were all really good friends with them. They were a great band, and they had so much fun. We would do gigs together. We would just laugh and hang out, you know. You know that band that did, what was that song? They were a Native American band.
Oh, Redbone.
Redbone. What was their hit?
Yeah.
Mustache?
Let me get you love.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. Come on and get your love. Yeah. So anyway, I didn't know the song, but he came rushing backstage. He said, June, we just cut a hit. He was so happy, and I totally believed him, you know, and they had cut a hit. So there were great guys. You know, the brown and the black guys were the nicest to us, but everyone I mentioned, you know, so far, they were all white guys. So, you know, the basic line is the better they are, the nicer they were, quite frankly. You know?
No competition.
I guess so, because they loved us, we loved them. I mean, even when we met the Beatles, you know, a couple at a time or whatever, you could tell they were just so relieved, and their women were relieved because they knew we weren't after their men. You know, there was just a certain understanding of what it took to do the work, you know, and that was just a real knowing, really shared information.
I think a lot of men, definitely at the time, and it still stands now, just didn't. They were dismissive of you because they didn't want to think that women were better musicians than they were. And in a lot of cases, you very clearly were. You're
absolutely right. And I've had guys admit that to me now. I was like, what an idiot I was, you know. Yeah. I just put you down because I was jealous.
That period after you left the band and your sister and the rest of them put out an album, I know there was talk about you rejoining for that tour.
I did rejoin for the
You did rejoin for that tour.
Yeah, the Butter Boy tour. We rehearsed there. We tried to get a record deal with that band, but I didn't want to call it Fanny. And at the last second, the guys from the record company said, well, you know, we want you to call yourselves Fanny. I said, no. I mean, you know, those voices, they have just decreed I cannot be in a band called Fanny. That's why Fanny walked the earth. That came from a conversation. Fine, Fanny walked the earth. That's good, you know.
Did the voices tell you to reunite later when the reissues?
No, it wasn't like that. It's just that Jean was at my house when she got the call. She was with me in Woodstock during this really big snowstorm. She got this phone call, and it was management. They said, hey, she had just told me that Fanny had finally split up forever. But she got this call, and management said, hey, you got a hit. You got to come back so we can make some money. And then she called me about a week later, and she asked me if I played guitar on that tour, and that's how it all came back together. But interestingly enough, that's what led me to women's music and Chris Williamson, because I was in LA rehearsing for that, what I call Fanny Point One tour. And Chris was recording Changing the Change. I don't know if you're familiar with that album, but it's great. And she asked me to play on a couple of cuts. And then after Fanny did that tour and we didn't get the record deal, in the meantime, I had played on a couple of cuts. And then she asked me to go on the road with her. And because the record deal didn't come through, I went out with her, and that was incredible. It was so paradigm shifting. I mean, women's music mixed in with the music of the day, which was changing, was molting into, you know, disco, especially with so much coke around. My God. Really. And Jean and I ended up in New York, actually, after I did the women's music bit for about a year. We ended up doing Ladies on the Stage in New York with Tom Sellers, and I co-produced it together, and that's a great album. But we try to be as kind of on the mark with disco and that kind of thing. But then EMI bought the record company, bought UA, and we were cast out into the wilderness. So that was terrible.
What was the experience like playing together with them, you know, decades later, when there was, I think it was in San Francisco, you did a show.
The tour we did for the, you know, the release of the documentary, Fanny, The Right to Rock, on PBS. So Fanny did a like four city gig tour in California in May. So that was 2 drummers, 2 bass players. Gene was singing from a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Patty and I played, so that was big. So there's been different, well, what would be the word? Different composites.
Iterations. Yeah.
Yeah, iterations. So I feel like, you do the best at each one. I thought it was important to do this tour. I mean, I had to think about it. I mean, am I going to go on this? Gene is on a wheelchair and blah, blah, blah. But I think it was successful because we got out there. And I'm 75. Dude, I mean, there I was playing Fanny material at 75. Fanny is not easy to play. I'll tell you that right now. It is not easy to play. I mean, even me, I was huffing and puffing to keep up with those parts.
Yeah.
We ended up doing Ain't That Peculiar, which I had not played since Fanny, but I had the same guitar.